and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and tonight's guest is Jesse Ervin, Vice President of Fan Engagement and Digital Marketing at Warner Records. Jesse has spent most of his life working in music. Throughout his career, he's worked with some of the biggest acts in the world, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Green Day, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Snoop Dogg, and a number of others. In his current role, his main responsibilities include providing social strategy and cutting edge marketing ideas to elevate Warner's roster of talent. So, with all that said, Jesse, thanks so much for being here. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you so much for having me, and that was such a nice intro. Really excited to get into it.
Awesome. Well, with that, let's get right into question one. Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think that the first advice on the personal note, I would definitely, I would say, just treat people the way that you feel everyone should be treated. It's a small business, and things come back to you, and it's really important to not only work hard, do a great job, continue to grow your stature, but also be kind while doing it. That's something that I don't think I would have changed about myself, but as a constant reminder, I think it's really important to always have a good positive attitude, even if things get absolutely insane in this business. I try and always look at things in a positive way, even when it's very, very hard to be positive, and that's in personal life as well, and really trying to do the best that you can just in life. And then the other thing I would actually tell myself is, in about 20 years, vinyl is going to be huge. So go buy all those Beatles records that are lying around for $1. They're going to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in 20 years.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yes.
and then on a professional level, I think that the advice I would give myself would be really learn how to manage people. I think that I manage a large group of people now, and it's one of my favorite things to do. But it's not easy, and I learned, kind of the hard way. I guess, managing people is there's a fine line of being professional, and you have to sometimes have those hard conversations, and it's just really not easy. So I think that learning, key management, it would be a really great advice for myself. And yeah, that's those are the two bits, I think.
All great advice. So before we go into the next question, I have to know from the introduction, what was your time like working with Snoop Dogg?
It was great. He had the office next to me while I was at Capitol. We'd hired him on to be the new CEO of Priority Records.
Mhm.
And the good thing about it is we were in a meeting introducing ourselves, and him and I went to the same high school. He's like 10
Oh,
years.
wow.
Yeah, he's like 10 years older than me. But I stood up and I said, I went to Long Beach Poly, and he couldn't believe it. And so that created a nice bond with us. And but he had the office next to me, and let's just say getting elevated was super important to him before he did anything, and it was just part of his lifestyle. So you have to wait and make sure he gets in the right headspace, and then you're good to
Mm, love that. That's so crazy that you went to the same high school. It is
go.
such a
Yeah,
small world and
it
such a
really
small
is.
business.
It really is.
Well, let's dive into question two. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we both know that it's no different in the music industry. And sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes they can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
I actually think I might have a couple. But I
Ooh.
think that the biggest secret, I think, is that this is that I can tell, of course, that this is a business of relationships, and you are really only as strong as your relationship with the artist, with the manager, and with your internal team. And I think that some people try to force that. Some people don't realize that you have to. It takes time, and it takes learning trust, and it's just not something that comes easy. But I know that with some of the artists that I work with, if I call them, they're artists will pick up, and they're gonna
Mhm.
then be able to, as we're marketing a record or a song, they're gonna kind of like trust what you suggest, versus no trust, and also kind of like what we say sometimes is doing the record label thing and
Mhm.
pushing something on an artist that isn't the right thing but sounds great, or looks great on paper or great in a meeting. I do not like doing anything like that. I really like to do things that are unconventional that actually move the needle. So I think that, yeah, just the relationships of it all. It's so important. I tell my team, and also I do this too, is like go out to dinner with your artists, take them to baseball games, really create that trust, because a lot of time, I mean, what I do in social media, artists don't want to do that part all the time. They're artists, so they want to create music, they want to go on tour, and then having to post about it or do a TikTok challenge can be a force, and
Mhm.
sometimes maybe not the right thing, but when it is the right thing, it's really important to have that trust. And then the other secret is backstage at concerts is horrible. There's nothing good back there. It sounds awesome.
What? You
It's
just
on
ruined my whole life.
it's the food's not good. There's nowhere comfortable to be.
Oh man. No. I've seen though the venue in LA, the major venue that's kind of like the equivalent to the MSG here, is they always come out with a good cake. I've seen that
Oh
a
yeah, the
few
forum.
times.
Yeah, yeah. I have
Yeah.
friends that work at the forum. Now that's actually the forum club, and that's awesome. It's
Okay.
that's always a fun time. They always have great cakes and great food and stuff. But if you probably
Awesome.
want backstage where the artist is, completely the
Yeah.
opposite.
Mm-mm. Good to know. Good to know. I'll remember that. Well, kind of unrelated, but I know that you started off as a webcast producer. Is that correct?
I did that when I was at House of my first like professional full-time job was working for House of Blues Entertainment, on the webcast side, actually. And we were very early on in pay-per-view webcast. We had all of our venues equipped with cameras, and so we were shooting all the artists that were going through the venues, which is, at the time I think that there were 8 or 9, um, all over the country, and we would then produce the content and put it on the web. It was very, very early for that. And it probably was 10 years too early. But during that time, also, I continued on. I was working for K Rock and
Mhm.
producing all of their webcasts as well. So I'd produce all the webcasts with the artists and all the backstage stuff, and we're working on the interviews. And so I've seen probably every K Rock style band more than you can even imagine. And but it was great, and there was great group of people, and led me to kind of where I am now.
Going off of that, how have you kind of evolved into the role that you're in now? I know fan engagement is kind of a new title that's been thrown around.
Yeah, we changed the name here from just straight up digital marketing to fan engagement like 5 years ago. And the goal was that everything is digital marketing now, pretty much.
Mhm.
Everything you think about how you're marketed to is digital, with an ad or on social. But really for us, it's about engaging the fan, and then hopefully getting them to engage with content. And if it's a video, or if it's a stream, or buying a record, it's some sort of engagement that's going to get you to the place that you want to go. As well as like serving the super fan, driving new fans of artists, building new consumers and new communities, all that sort of stuff. But it all really starts with being a fan. And I
Mhm.
always think of like, as a fan, how do I want to be communicated to? And that's how we construct our messaging. That's how I like to really do my marketing, because as a fan, you see something that is just buy me, and it just is a turnoff. But if you're engaging with a really cool piece of content, and that you're like, oh man, I really do need that, $60 deluxe edition vinyl or whatever, and then that's going to lead to a sale. I like, really speaking with the consumer and speaking with a fan instead of speaking at them, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense. It's just a bit of a nuance that I've learned for a long time. And in also, going back to relationships and creating trust with your fan base
Mhm.
versus just, you look at someone's Instagram feed and it's just full of ad mats and things that are just pushing things at you. I think that a lot of consumers become blind to that. So
Mhm.
I really try not to do that. And I also tell artists not to do that in their social media messaging as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's such a cool time. There's so, like you said, everything is digital and there's so many different ways that that can be taken. There's like people building worlds digitally and all these cool websites. So it's definitely an exciting time to work in the digital space.
It
All
definitely
right.
is.
Are you ready for the last question?
I'm ready for the last question.
Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, I'll bet there was one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I've probably interviewed, I don't know how many hundreds of people, and one question I always ask is, what are you listening to? Because I like to make sure that music is forefront, but no one's ever asked me that before. As being in music, I do this because I love music. I'm a avid vinyl collector, as I said earlier. But no
Mhm.
one's ever said like, what are you listening to, or who are some of your favorite artists on the label? And I think that a lot that one, if I can give a couple bits of advice, I think it's important to have a two-way conversation. You know, and I always really like you remember the good ones, and most of the good ones are the people I've hired because they're engaged, and they also want to know about you and what they can learn from you. And I think that that's actually pretty rare in an interview. It's more about you know when can I get hired, or what does success look like in this role, instead of, again, I keep on saying it, but going back to trust. And what are you listening to would be awesome. And I would tell them all about the how much I love John Coltrane and the Beastie Boys. Um, and so that's really it. And also, rarely do you get asked about just like your career, or how did you get to this role. I think maybe I've only been asked that a couple times. That's another thing is as someone who is hiring for a role that might be more junior,
Mhm.
finding the path of my success and how you can learn from me to find your success. I think would be a great a bit of advice, and as well as something that can be applied to all industries.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, going off of that, is there anything you would say to someone asking you what you would suggest to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think hard work. This is for those who work in the music business like yourself. This is not 9 to 5, and it doesn't work
Mhm.
for people like that. As someone who is really, um I've left my wife at restaurants. I have been called out of funerals. I've been called out of weddings to do something for an artist. That's what the job is, and you have to have that work ethic. If you don't, this is not for you. Unfortunately, it is the funnest business to work in. And there are so many perks. Yeah, I get to work with artists every day. There are artists that I work with that are friends. But as much as they put in the work, you have to put in the work even more. And I really think that for me, that's worked. I mean, I'm passionate about music in general, but also our artists, our culture, our teams, all those sort of things. Is really what I see, as my success. Like never letting up, never taking no, always turning over every rock to get what you need,
Mhm.
and making yourself and the artist a success.
Totally. Well, hey, whoever you're interviewing next, listen to this.
Exactly. Listen to this.
Awesome. Well, Jesse, it has been so great having you on tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to chat. And to
Absolutely.
all of my listeners, I know you enjoyed hearing from me and Jesse. So stay tuned for next week's episode of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.